Hello there and welcome back. In the previous episode, we finished working on the option to chop down trees, and before we start with this episode, I just wanted to take some time to talk about the future of this series. This will be episode number 16, and we already covered a lot of different things, a lot of different features that you can find in survival games, but of course there's still a lot more that we need to do. I'm just going to tell you about the different things that I have in mind to add to the series in the future. So we want to add a building system to our game, right? It's a big feature that almost every survival game has it. We can create different components, different walls and rooftops, and then we can create a house. So that's something we want to add to this game, right? We're going to use maybe the different materials that we have or other materials, and then we're going to be able to create and build houses. Next, we also want to create some kind of water system. So we want to have rivers or lakes, and then we want to also maybe have fishing and craft boats and maybe swim. Okay, so that's also something that we want to add in the future. We also want to have farming in our game, right? We want to be able to plant different seeds and then grow different fruits and vegetables. We also want to farm animals, okay? So we want to be able to have different farm animals and reproduce them and maybe gather different resources from them. Next, we also want to have quests, right? That's a very big feature in every game, not only in survival games. So we want to have maybe main quests and side quests and then different objectives, and we're going to have different characters that are going to give us quests. So quests are really the lifeline of every game because they tell you what to do and where to go, and this is what guides you through the game. So we also want to create quests. Next, we also want to have things that are more related to the game itself. For example, achievements, right? We're going to have the option to set different goals, and then when the player reaches these goals, he will unlock different achievements. We also want to have an option to save and load the game, right? We don't always want to start from the beginning when we run the game. We want to be able to save a game at a certain state and later load the game. So, of course, there's a lot more things that we want to add, but these are just few of the things that I have in mind right now, and these are things that you can expect to be in the series in the future. So there's also a big change that I did inside our game, and if you remember, I told you that I want to change the terrain because we have this terrain from the second episode, I think, and we did not change it, but I really wanted to change it a bit, so I simply used the terrain tools and I created a bigger landscape. So let's see how it looks, okay? So we can see that I added a lot of new things. Well, not new things, but we have these mountains, we have a lot of trees right now, we have the same rabbits. There's actually nothing new. I did not create new scripts, I did not even import new assets. I used everything we used before. All of these mountains are simply terrain that I sculpted with the terrain tool, and then I painted them with the different textures. So I used this moss texture and other textures, okay? So again, it's not professional, and I'm not a professional, and designing levels is not my specialty. I prefer to write code, but we also need to do these things. So I just did what I can, okay? So I also created more trees, and of course we can now chop down these trees. And we also had the different sticks and stones, so now they are not just lying in one spot. I mean, I have this part over here so we can do all kinds of tests with them, but I also scattered these things and I placed them next to different trees. So now we can actually go and search for resources, okay? So we can find a stick over here, and there's some kind of Maybe the box collider is in the way. Never mind. But this is the land that we have right now. And let's just go a bit. I always forget that we can also jump because we never used it. So let's go up. And notice that we have nothing that will prevent us from climbing these mountains, right? We did not set anything. So even if the mountain is very steep, we can still climb it. So maybe in the future we want to disable it. So we can see that we have this entire land. Now in this episode, we're going to add a very important feature. It's not going to be a big feature because it's not something complicated, but it's important because it's going to add a whole new aspect to our game. And I'm talking about sounds and music, okay? Up until now, we played in silence. We only heard my noisy computer, but right now we want to also add different sound effects to different actions, and we also want to add some kind of background music, okay? So it's going to add a lot to our game, and you're going to feel like the game is alive, right? Because that's what sound adds to games and to movies, and we also want to take care of that. So before we start adding sounds and music, I want to create a new category, and it's just something that I wanted to do a long time ago because we only have this one category and this one blueprint inside, right? We have this accent side, but we want to add a few more things, and because we have the logs right now, we can also craft them into other things. So I'm going to add I'm actually going to add 2 more categories because it's also something that I want to add later, and why not just do it right now? So we're going to open our crafting screen and we're going to click on this tools button, and then Control D, we're going to duplicate it 2 times, okay? So the first one we're going to call survival button, and the second one refine button. Okay, so now we're going to take this survival and we're going to move it over here, and the refine one, we're going to move it over here. So these are basically just 2 more categories. So we're going to change the images and the text. I'm going to play with that later even more. Okay, so now we have these 2 new categories. So we're going to have some kind of category for survival things. For example, we're going to craft, I don't know, maybe a bonfire and other things that are related to our survival, maybe some potions or some food. And we're also going to have this refine and process category. So in this category, we're going to process different materials into other materials. So for example, we have the logs that we added in the previous episode. So we don't want to just use the logs to craft things. We want it to be a little bit more realistic. I like these things. So we're going to take the log and we're going to process it into planks, okay? And then we're going to use planks to craft different items. So it's going to add something to the game, okay? Now that we have these categories, we also want to clone this tools category screen, right? Because this is just the main screen, but this is the screen of the category itself. So we're going to take this and duplicate it 2 more times. Let's place it over here so it will all be together. And this one we're going to name survival category screen and refine category, okay, screen. Now, if we're going to hide this one, and we're also going to hide this one, this is the survival one, so let's change the text to basic survival. And for now, we're going to leave this X because we don't have any blueprints inside the basic survival, but we do want it in this position, and later we're going to create a new blueprint. Now we're going to hide this one, and we're going to make this one active, and we're going to rename it to refine and process. Let's just, okay. And over here, we're going to change this axe blueprint into a plank blueprint, okay? Because we want to be able to craft planks, okay? And inside, we're going to change the image. We're going to change the text to plank. And over here, we're going to make this requirement nothing, because we only want to have one requirement. And this one we're going to change to 1 log. So it will cost us 1 log to craft planks, okay? And the amount of planks is actually going to be 2 planks. So we're not going to craft 1 plank, we're going to craft 2 planks each time. So to do that, so to actually let the player know, we're going to do something like that, okay? Okay, so plank times 2. So it's going to craft 2 planks, and it takes only 1 log, okay? So this will be the plank blueprint, but of course there's a few more things that we need to add inside the crafting system to actually add this blueprint. So now we have this, and let's also change this. So we have the, let's see, it was this one, I think, right? So now we're going to go inside our crafting system script, okay, crafting system. And over here, we're going to do all the things that we need to do to add a new category. So we can see that we already have this crafting screen UI. So that's the main UI, but we also have these categories, tool screen UI. So we just want to add 2 more. So survival screen UI and refine screen UI. Then we have these buttons, so we also want to add a survival button and a refine button. And we also want to add 1 more button to craft the plank. And we also want to add the requirement for the plank. So plank rec 1. And we also want to add another blueprint. So this is the axe blueprint. We want to add the plank blueprint. So it's going to be named plank. And it's simply going to take 1 log, and that's it. Okay? So all of this is optional. Well, what is this? Let's see. Name, required number. Yeah, so we're only going to have 1 item, and the item will be log 1. And this is optional, so we're going to remove it. Or maybe we're simply going to make it 0. Okay, so it's not going to give us an error. And now that we created this blueprint, we need to continue over here and add to it. So we have this tools button. So we're going to copy all of this, and we're going to change it to survival button. And this will be refine button. Then we are going to open the survival screen with it. Survival screen. And with this one, we're going to open the refine screen. Then inside we're going to find the tools button. No, here we find the tools button. So here, let's see how it's called. Crafting screen, survival button, and refine button. Okay, so it needs to be exactly the same. Survival button and refine button. Then it's going to get the buttons, and over here it's going to open these methods. So we need to create two more methods. Open survival category and open refine category. So we're going to create two more methods over here. The one will be this one and the one will be this one. Now, when we open this screen, we want to hide the main UI screen, and we also want to hide all other screens if they were opened. So we're going to make this false as well. And we want to make the survival opened, okay? And over here, we want to close this one, close this one, close this one as well. And there's actually no reason to close it because they will probably be closed, but if in the future we're going to have a way to open this one from another category, then we also want to close all the rest. So this one will be refine. So we're going to open the refine. True. So basically close all the other screens and we only open the relevant screen. So why did I call it? Let's see, rename. Lowercase, okay. So now we have this, and we can also make the refine closed over here. And over here we can do the same. We can take both of these now that we have them and make them false, okay? So we basically want to make sure that all other screens are closed and only the relevant screen is open. So it's this one and this one and this one, right? Refine, survival, and tools category. Now we added all of these things, so we want to add the blueprint, right? So we're going to take all of this, we're going to copy it, and we're going to name it plank. And over here we're going to use the plank rec1, and we're going to delete this one. So now we need to go to the refine screen, right? And find the plank and rec1. And then over here, we want to use the craft plank button, refine screen, plank. So we simply just change all the things, right? Button, and then it's going to craft, but this time it's going to craft the plank blueprint. So let's see that we're not missing anything. Refine screen, tool screen, craft plank. Okay, so I think that's all. Now let's continue to see what else. Nothing here, that's very generic. Not here. Update. Okay, so over here, we also close these windows. And we open this one. Crafting screen UI, false, false. So we want to close all the rest, so we added two more. So let's also close them. Survival and refine, okay. Let's see, nothing here. Okay, so over here, we also want to add the log count, okay, because now we have a new resource. And let's see, let's add another case. So if it's log, then just add to the log count. Let's see. And over here, we're going to add the plank, okay? So the plank only needs one requirement, and it needs one log, and here we're going to display the log count. And then we also want to check if we have at least one log, okay? And then we're going to craft plank, okay? So that's all. Let's rename it to plank. Now, there is something that we need to take care of, because when we're going to craft this log, well, actually this plank, when we're going to craft this log, these planks, it's going to produce 2 planks, right? So what if we don't have enough room in our inventory? And if we think about it, we never dealt with this problem even when we crafted the axe, right? We never checked if our inventory has one empty slot. I mean, right, if we have these 3 stones and 3 sticks and we craft, then they are going to disappear and there's going to be room for this axe. But for example, in this case, we're going to have 1 log, but we're going to produce 2 planks. So it means that if we don't have any room inside our inventory, this log will disappear and then another plank will appear, but there will be no room for the second plank, okay? So it's going to break the game, right? Something bad is going to happen. So we want to make sure that we have at least 2 spaces inside our inventory to be able to craft this plank, okay? And if we already do it, we can also make sure that we have 1 empty space to craft the axe, okay? We don't want to rely on the fact that these stones and sticks will disappear, so we probably are going to have room for the axe, right? We want to have room for the axe before we craft and make these things disappear. So we are going to go inside our inventory system and we're going to find this check if full method. So we are using this method to decide if we can pick up an item, right? Because we do check if we have room in our inventory to be able to pick up an item. But we never check if we have room when we craft an item. So we're going to change this method a little bit, and we're going to be able to use it for both situations, okay? So instead of check if full, we're going to rename it to slots, or actually check slots available, okay? And it's going to take in a parameter, okay? Empty needed, okay? So each time we're going to use this method, we're also going to specify what is the amount of empty slots that we want to check, right? We want to check if we have 1 slot available, or 2 slots available, or even 0 slots available, right? So we're going to be able to use this method to check all of these things. So instead of checking if our inventory is full, right? If 21 slots are full, we're simply going to take this empty needed and we're going to decrease it from the 21. Because if, for example, we want to check if we have 1 empty slot, then this one will be 1, and it's going to take 21, and it's going to decrease 1 from it. So it's going to be 20, and then it's going to check if we have 20 slots that are full. It means that we have 1 slot that is empty, and then it's going to return true, right? So this is the logic over here. So now we made this method into something more generic, so we can actually check how many slots and not just check if this entire inventory is full, okay? So the place that we use to check if the inventory is full is over here when we picked up an item, right? Not over here. Let's see where we're using it. So to check where you're using a method, you can simply right-click on it and find all references, and then we can double-click on this And we can see that we're using it over here. And as expected, there's an error because we're not providing any arguments. So it's inside the interactable object. So when we pick up an item, we first want to check if there is room inside our inventory. So up until now, we checked if the inventory is not full, right? We use this exclamation mark to check if the inventory is not full. So what we can do is simply add 0 as an argument, because now we check if the inventory has 0 empty slots, and we want to make sure that it doesn't have 0 empty slots. So anything more than 0 empty slots, so it means 1 empty slot, 2 empty slot, is good for us, and then we're going to be able to add something to the inventory, right? Because this simply means false. So we want to make sure that we don't have 0 empty slots. So we can do it this way, or we can simply remove this false and say that we want at least 1 empty slot, right? So if we have at least 1 empty slot, it will return true, and then we're going to be able to add something to the inventory. So I think this is more readable, right? Instead of doing false, if we have 0, it's not very clear what we want to do over here, but this is more clear. Check slots available, and we want to check if there is 1 available slot. Okay? So now we're going to save this and go back into our crafting system. And over here, we want to add this check, okay? So over here, when we craft the axe, we also want to check inventory system, instance, slots available, and we want to make sure that we have at least 1 slot available because we only craft 1 axe, right? 1 item. And over here, we want to check if we have 2 slots available, right? Because we're crafting 2 planks. And this way, we can check if we have 2 empty slots or 1 empty slot. And later, we can use it to check if we have more empty slots, okay? If we're going to craft 5 things, for example, right? So now that we dealt with all of this, we can go back into our editor. We can go to the resources and we can create a new resource. So we're going to Control D, duplicate it, and we're going to rename it to plank. We're going to click on the plank and we're going to change a few things. We're going to name it plank. We're going to add the description, so it's something that I like to do. Let's say wooden planks are a very common material processed from trees found practically everywhere. Okay, and inside the functionality, used to craft many items, rather various items, and used in construction as well, right? I told you that we want to add building to our game, so we're going to use these planks to build different parts of the house, okay? So this is just some kind of information that we can give the user. Then we're going to make it trashable, we're not going to make it consumable, and we're not going to make it equipable, okay? So now we have this plank. And now let's see if everything is working. Let's first hide this thing. And oh yes, I forgot, before we run the game, we need to go over here and add all the references, right? So inside the crafting system, not over here, crafting system, we want to add both of these screens, right? So the survival screen goes over here and the refine screen goes over here, okay? So now let's run. And now we can go to any of these trees. And let's chop them down so we can get logs. And after we have this log, we can use it to craft planks. Okay, so now let's take one log. Oh, what? Inventory is full. Wait a minute. Okay, so I checked what was the problem, and the problem was with this check slots available method, okay? The way it is written, it is not going to work, okay? So we need to change it a little bit. It's just something that I miscalculated. So instead of checking how many occupied slots we have, okay? And then check if the amount of occupied slots is less than what we want, then we're simply going to check how many empty slots we have, okay? So we're going to change this counter to empty slot, okay? And we're going to check how many empty slots we have. So each time we're going to go over one of these slots. If we have less or 0 items inside, it means that it's an empty slot. So we're going to add 1 over here. And then we're simply going to check if the amount of empty slots is more or equals the amount of empty slots that we need, okay? So if we need at least 1 empty slot, and we have more than 1 empty slot or 1 empty slot, it's going to return true. Okay, so it's just something that I miscalculated. And there's actually a few more things that I missed out, okay? So if we go to our crafting system, over here, when we try to find references for these buttons, we are not supposed to do it inside these refine and survival screens because these buttons don't exist over here. They exist inside this crafting screen UI, right? If we go over here, we can see that they're inside this crafting screen UI. So it's just something that I missed. So we need to take this and replace these ones, okay? Because we try to find these buttons inside this screen. Now, there is another thing. If we go back into the resources, when I created this plank, I forgot to change the image. So we're going to find some kind of plank image, and I think we're going to use these ones. And it's good because we're actually creating 2 planks, okay? So now we're going to use this one. And also, if we open our refine category screen, we don't want to craft logs, okay? I don't know what's wrong with me today, but we don't want to craft logs. We want to craft planks, right? So we're going to change this image to be the image of these logs, okay? And that's not all. There's also another thing, but it's something that is even deeper than these things that I forgot. So let's go back into our crafting system. And it's something that we never took care of because we did not create more than this axe, right? Up until now, we only created this one axe. So the problem we have right now is that we're trying to craft 2 planks. So it goes over here, right? Craft plank. And then it simply adds a plank to our inventory. But we want to add 2 planks, right? So we need to do something about it, right? And it's something I forgot to add. So we're going to fix this together, right? It's not something that I plan to do because it's not something that I even thought about, okay? So let's fix this right now. First of all, we're simply going to add another parameter inside this blueprint object. So let's open our blueprint script. And over here, we're simply going to add another parameter. and it's going to be at the very end. Well, actually, no, it's going to be over here, and we're going to call it produced items, okay? So we're going to provide it with the amounts of item we want to produce. And then we're going to also have a variable over here. And we're going to set it number of items to produce. Okay, we want to be a bit more specific, and we're going to set it to be to this argument that we send inside. Okay, so when we create this new blueprint, we're going to provide it with the amount of items, and then it's going to save it inside the blueprint. And now when we have the amount of items we want to produce, we go over here into the crafting system, and we need to add it over here. So after the axe, we need to provide it over here. So we want to, no, we only want to create one axe, but with the planks, we want to create 2 planks. So we're going to add 2 over here. Okay. So it may seem a bit confusing, but you can always hover over this blueprint and you can see that the first parameter is the name, the second one is the produce items, the third one is the required number of, well, the amount of requirements, right? Because some items have more than one requirement. And then we actually give in the requirements. Okay, so this is the name, this is the amount of items that we want to produce, and this is the amount of requirements. So here we have 2 requirements, and here we have 1 requirement, this log. So now that we have this information, we can go over here, and then we simply do an if statement. Right? So we can say, or we can actually do something better, because maybe later we're going to want to create more than one item, so we don't always want to. What I wanted to do is just to say, if blueprint number of items to produce equals 1, then do this. Else if the amount is 2, then add 2 items. So you can see where is the problem, right? Because if in the future we want to create 3 items or 5 items or 10 items, we're going to have to add a lot of different else ifs. So that's not very efficient coding. So what we can do is simply do some kind of loop. So for, let's just copy it from, let's go to the inventory system. Let's copy this, okay, this for. So we simply want to loop over the amount of items we want to craft. So over here, so what is going on over here? We simply want to loop the amount of times that we provided over here. Okay, so if we provided that we want to produce 1 item, we want to loop 1 time. If we want to create 2 items, we want to loop 2 times. So we don't have to create a lot of else if statements. We can just do it this way. So in the beginning, I will be 0, okay? And then we say, as long as I is smaller than the number of items to produce, run this and then add 1 to it, okay? So for example, we want to produce 1 item. Then as long as I is smaller than 1, it will run this loop. So in the beginning, I will be 0. It will run this 1 time, but then it will add 1 to I. So I will become 1, and then it's no longer smaller than 1, so it's not going to run it once more, okay? And it's just going to continue with the code. If we provide it with 2, then the first time I will be 0. It's going to run it once. Then it's going to add 1 to I. So I is still smaller than 2. So then it's going to run it once more. And then it's going to add 1 more to I. So I will be 2. And then it's no longer smaller than 2. So it's going to stop. And this way it's going to create and add items to the inventory according to the amount of numbers of items to produce. Okay? And of course, you can also do it with the else if, but that's just not efficient. So let's also write it here. Produce the amount of items according to the blueprint. So now let's save this and let's hope that everything will work. Let's play. And let's chop down this tree. Sometimes I try to record these episodes very fast, so I forget to do all of these tests, and then I'm just stuck with fixing it while I'm recording. But it's just because I want to create more episodes faster. So now we can see that these are rolling. Let's pick up this log. And now that we have this log, we can go over here, refine and process. Let's craft this. And it really created 2 planks, and that's nice, okay? And of course, we can go and also pick up this one. And then we can craft 2 more planks. And of course, if we're not going to have enough room, it's not going to allow us to craft these planks. So later, we're going to be able to use these planks and create maybe some kinds of walls or other things that we can make out of wood, okay? So that's just something that I wanted to add to this episode, although it has nothing to do with sound effects and music. Okay, so now that this is done, we can start with adding sounds into our game. So first of all, we're going to create a new script and we're going to name it Sound Manager. Then we're going to create another object over here that will also be a system object. So we're going to name it Sound Manager as well. And we're going to drag our Sound Manager, where is it? To this object, okay? So the Sound Manager is going to be a singleton like any other system. And we're going to be able to trigger these sounds using this Sound Manager. So it's not something complicated, it's very easy. The tricky part is just to decide where exactly in our code we want to trigger all of these sounds, okay? So I'm going to show you a few different examples and then you're going to have an idea of how to do this on your own, okay? So we're going to open the Sound Manager script. So we're going to make this script into a singleton. So let's delete all of this. Let's go to one of these singletons and just copy this part. And also the awake method. Let's rename it. So our Sound Manager will contain the different audio sources. And each audio source will simply be a different sound, okay? So we're going to start with audio source and we're going to call it drop item sound, okay? So we're going to start with a simple sound effect when we drop an item into our inventory or one of the quick slots, okay? So it's just some random sound that I'm going to show you how to add. And we're going to do a bunch of these, okay? So you just understand how to do it. So each time you want to add a new sound, you need to create an audio source and give it some kind of name that will describe the sound itself, okay? Then after we add it over here, we're going to go to the sound manager and we can see it over here. So we need to provide it with an audio source. So we're going to add a component, audio source, and we're going to simply take this and drag it into this slot, okay? So now this audio source is the audio source that is connected to this drop item sound. And then we simply need to provide it with the actual file of the sound, okay? So inside our assets, we're going to create a sound folder, okay? I already created it. And inside, we're going to put all of our sounds. So I have a lot of different sounds, and it's just some things that I found online. Some of them I even recorded with my own microphone, things that I just improvised, okay? So we have all of these sound effects. We also have a folder for music. So I'm going to take this, let's find it, drop item sound, okay? And I'm going to drag it into this audio clip reference, okay? So now it's connected to this audio source, and this audio source is connected to this drop item sound. So it's this thing over here. So now we can call it from anywhere within our project, okay? From any script. So we need to find the place inside our script when we actually want to trigger this sound. So we can also play with the volume, with the pitch and different settings over here. One thing that you want to do is disable display on awake, because what it means is that when we start the game, it will automatically play this sound. And that's something that we don't want to do with this sound. We want to play the sound when we actually trigger it. So we're going to disable this as well. So now inside our sound manager, we want to create a method. And we're going to call it play drop sound, okay? And the reason we need this method is because we're going to call it from a different script. But we need to do something. We don't simply want to play this sound. We want to check if this sound is not playing at the moment. And only if the sound is not playing at the moment, then we want to play it. So we're going to do if drop item sound is playing is not, right? We use this exclamation mark to say that it's not playing. Then drop item sound play. And with this, we can actually start this sound, okay? But now we simply created this method and we want to call it from our script. So the spot that we want to call it from is inside our item slot script, because this is the spot that we drop any item into our slots, right? So over here, when we drop the item after this if statement, we're simply going to go to the sound manager instance, and we're going to play drop sound, okay? So it's simply going to call this method, and this method will play the sound. So let's save this. And now if we go into our game, and when we open our inventory and we drag this item and we drop it to any one of these slots, it should play this sound. So I hope you hear it, okay? But there is actually a sound. And we can also drop it over here. So we can see that it's very simple to add sounds. So now we're going to add a bunch of different sounds, and each of them will be a bit different, so you get the general idea of adding sounds, and then you can do it on your own, okay? I'm going to add a few sounds. So these are just a few sounds that we're going to add, and some of them are trickier because they need to be in very specific points in our code. So I just want to show some of them, okay? And now that we did this, we can also go to the editor and add a bunch of different audio sources. So it was 5, I think. And now we have all of these and they're all connected. Now inside our sound manager, we should probably create a method for every one of these audio sources, right? So no, that's not what we're going to do because we want to be efficient, and in the future we're going to have maybe hundreds of different sound effects, so we don't want to create a method for every sound effect, especially if what this method does is simply play this sound. So if we're going to create another method for play craft sound, it's basically going to be the same thing, right? The only difference is the sound itself. So why not create some kind of generic method that will simply receive the sound and play it, right? So instead of creating hundreds of methods, we can create one method that will play all of them, okay? So instead of this one, we're going to rename it to play sound, okay? And it's going to receive an audio source as an argument. Source, well, sound to play, okay? And then we simply want to play this sound. So this is a generic method that we're going to call each time and simply provide it with the audio source. And now inside the item slot, we need to provide it with the audio source, so we can reference the sound manager again, instance, and drop item sound, okay? So we called this generic method and we provided with the drop item sound, okay? In this way, we're going to be able to call this method for every sound. So let's just copy this, and next we want to take care of this crafting sound, okay? So the crafting sound will be played when we craft an item. So we're going to go into our crafting system, and over here inside the craft any item, before we add the item to the inventory, we're going to play this sound, okay? And of course we need to change it to craft sound. Now, this specific sound, in your case, maybe you're not going to have this problem, but in my case, it's a sound that sounds like a few knocks, okay? And then we have a sound of something added to the inventory. But it's going to play, and then the sound of something added to the inventory will not be in sync with the actual item appearing in the inventory. And I just want you to understand what I'm talking about. And it's something that you don't need to do because you're probably just going to have some kind of crafting sound, a very simple crafting sound. But if we go over here and let's just pick up a few stones and sticks to craft something. If we're going to craft an axe, listen carefully. Okay, so there were two knocks and then some kind of swoosh sound. And the swoosh sound supposed to be the item appearing in the inventory. So because we have this part right after this part, the item is added to the inventory visually before the actual sound. So we want it to be in sync. So for that, we're going to place all of this inside a coroutine, okay? So we're going to copy this and we're going to call a coroutine over here, start coroutine, and we're going to call the method crafted delay for sound, okay? But we also need to provide it with the blueprint to craft. So let's first create this coroutine. Public. It doesn't have to be public. It can be just private because we're not going to reference this enumerator anywhere. So we're going to call it, let's just place this, and we're going to call it crafted delay for sound. okay? And of course, we need to return this yield return new wait for seconds. And I already calculated it, and it's about 1 second delay, okay? So now we also need to pass this blueprint. So we're going to pass the blueprint inside of this coroutine. So now it can use it. Blueprint, okay? So now it's going to play this sound, and by the end of this sound, it's going to trigger this coroutine with this delay. So the item will actually appear inside our inventory at the same moment that we have this swish sound, okay? But again, if you're not going to have this swish sound, then all of this is not relevant for you. So now we're going to deal with this tool swing sound, okay? So we're going to copy this part, and inside the equipable item, inside the update method, this is the point that we actually swing our axe, right? So we want to play this sound at this exact moment. We don't care if we actually hit the tree, as long as we swing the axe, okay? So, well, not this one. This one. Okay, and of course we want to swing, tool swing sound, okay? But in this case, we also need a coroutine, because the swing sound will not play at the exact moment that the animation is triggered, okay? And I can show you to prove it, but I hope you believe me. We just need a small delay to make both of them in sync, right? Because we don't want to play the sound when we start the animation. The swing sound should be just maybe a few milliseconds after we start with the animation, okay? Because there's the momentum and the swish sound, so we don't want to play it at the same moment. And it doesn't matter if we place it over here. It will still happen at the same moment, and it's not something that we want. We want to create some kind of delay, okay? So once again, we're going to create a coroutine. Swing sound delay, and we're going to yield return wait for seconds, and this time we want to do a very small delay of 0.2, okay? New. And we're going to play this thing over here. So before we actually connect it, I just want to show you what I mean, okay? So you understand why I'm doing this. So now we did not connect it, okay? We still did not connect this coroutine. We simply want to play this sound. So let's do it, and you're going to understand what is the problem. So now when I'm just clicking and swinging my axe, you can hear that the swing sound starts at the very beginning, but it's not really the spot that it should start. There should be some kind of very small delay. We want the sound to be only when the axe is actually cutting through the air, right? Not at the beginning. So we're going to connect this coroutine. So over here, we're going to start coroutine, and we're going to call this method. So now, I hope you notice the difference. You see, well, you hear the sound is not triggered when I click on the button, but it waits a few milliseconds. And now it is more realistic, okay? So that's basically the idea. You just find the part in the code that you need to make the sound, but sometimes you do need to create some kind of delay because you want it to be precise, right? You want to fine-tune it. So it's not enough to just find the spot, you also want it to sound realistic inside the game. So usually when we have animations and things like that, we want to be very precise. Otherwise the sound will just be out of sync, okay? Next, we want to take care of this chop sound, okay? So we're going to add it over here because this is the part that the tree is getting hit, okay? And over here, we can place it inside this if statement because this is the part where the tree is actually getting hit. So we don't need any coroutines this time. We're simply going to play this chop sound. Next, we want to take care of this pickup item sound. So first, let's copy this and let's go to our inventory system. So when we pick up an item, we're going to trigger this method, right? So the first thing, we want to play this pickup sound, okay? Pickup item sound. Because if this method is triggered, it means that we already picked up the item. Now, the next sound will be a bit more tricky, and that's something you're going to run into. And this is just the sound of walking around or doing something that is continuous, right? All of these sounds were just one-time events, right? We just trigger them, and each time we trigger them, they play. But this walking sound should be continuous. It should loop, okay? So we want to play this sound when we actually walk. Right now, we have some kind of grass walk sound. So you're going to hear the player walking on grass. But later, we're going to also add different sounds for different surfaces. For example, if we walk on concrete or if we walk on some kind of road, right? We want to make it pleasing to the ear, so we don't want it to sound the same every time. But right now we only have this grass walk sound, so I'm going to show you how to use it. So we want to trigger the sound when the player is walking, right? So we want to do it inside the player movement script. So let's find the script, player movement. We didn't touch this script for a while, so let's find it. Player movement. And inside, it's a bit tricky because we don't actually trigger the walking like many other movement scripts. We simply check if the axes are triggered and then we move the controller. So maybe in the future I'm going to change all of this because that's not the most efficient way to move the player, and maybe we're going to have different problems in the future with this script. But for now it works and I'm going to stick with it, okay? So the way we're going to check if the player is moving is by simply adding some kind of property, okay? And this property will check what is the last position of the player. And if the new position is different from the last position, it means that the player moved, okay? So we're going to have a vector tree last position. And we're going to initialize it with 0, 0, 0. We're also going to have some kind of boolean for testing that will keep track if our player is moving, okay? Now inside this update method, at the end of it, we're going to do an if statement and an else statement. So we're going to check if the last position is not equals the game object transform position. So if our new position is not the same as the last position, it means that we are moving. Okay? And if we're moving, we also want to play the sound. Sound manager instance play sound, and the sound that we want to play is sound manager instance grass walk sound. Okay? Now, if we stopped moving, then it means that our last position is the same as our current position, so the is moving will become false, and we're going to stop the sound. So the way to stop the sound, we're simply going to reference this audio source directly, and we're going to call this stop method. Okay? So it's going to stop this sound. Now, after we do this, we also want to make our last position the current position, right? Because we don't want it to always stay at 0. So this is the code that we need, and we can also test this right now. And I hope that you hear all of these sounds, otherwise I'm in a problem. So now we can start walking. And I hope that you can hear the grass. And when I'm stopping, it stops, right? So at this moment, even if we walk on this path, it still plays this grass sound because that's the only sound that we have. But later we're going to do some kind of check if we're standing on this kind of ground or if we stand on something else, right? And then we're going to play different sounds. But that's something that will be in the future. Now, there's another problem, and the problem is that if we walk and then we jump, we can still hear this walking sound. And it happens because the code thinks that we're moving, and the code is actually correct. We're actually moving. Even when we're jumping, we're still moving. So we need to do something else because we want to play the sound only when we're actually standing on the ground. And it's a good thing that we already have this is grounded Boolean, right? So we can use it over here. So if the last position is not equals the current position and is grounded is true. Okay? So only if we actually stand on the ground, we want to play this sound. So now let's go back over here. Let's play. And you can hear that when we're jumping, there is no sound, only when we actually walk. Now, besides all of these sound effects that I hope that you got the idea, right, how to add them, there's another thing that we usually add to games, and the thing is music. So to do that, we're going to add another audio source over here. Well, actually over here. So music, and all of these will be sound effects, public audio source, and we're going to name it starting zone background music. Okay? Because maybe later, if we go to another zone or another area, or we enter into a house, then we want to change the background music. So this is the audio source. And now over here, we can create another one. Okay, we're going to find my sound folder and music. So this adventure music is just something that I found on YouTube. Of course, you can use a different music. So I'm going to drag this adventure over here. And this time we're going to keep this play on awake because we don't really want to trigger this sound. We just want it to start when the game is started. Later, we also want to check if we actually start the game in this area, right? Maybe we save the game in a different area. So when we're going to have the option to save the game, we also need to change that. But for now, we're always starting at this zone. So we always want to start with this music. We also want to set it to loop, right? So loop means that when this sound will reach the end, it will simply start over, okay? Now, I also played with the sounds a bit before, so I'm going to change the sound to be 0.2 because we don't want it to be very loud. And inside this drop item, I also want to change the volume to 0.2 and the pitch to 0.8, okay? It's just something that I wrote to myself. You can always play with these values and find something that works for you, okay? So now we don't need to add anything inside our script because we simply say play on awake, okay? And of course we need to add this to the script. Even though we're not actually triggering it from the script, we still need to add it to the script like this, otherwise it's not going to get triggered, okay? So now we can play the game and see how it sounds. Maybe I need to do some kind of delay or actually make the sound of this tree hit before the actual but it's good for now. So it's really nice to hear some music inside our game. It really adds a lot to the game. There is this atmosphere. Now, you can add other things to play in the background. So instead of this adventure music, we can also add another audio source that will play some kind of background noises, right? Nature noises. For example, the wind blowing or birds singing or things like that. So you can just add another audio source and play it together with this one, or you can just use some kind of sound editing software and put both of these tracks together, and then you only need one. So I did it. I took this adventure music and I combined it with some kind of nature sounds. So I created this background music with nature, okay? So I'm going to use this one instead, and you're going to hear the difference. So you hear the sound of the birds. It's very peaceful and very nice. And these are the kinds of things that you can also think about. You can add whatever you want. For example, if you're going to have some kind of lake or the sea, then you can add sounds of waves crashing. And every little thing that you're going to add is going to really make your game better, right? It will feel better. It will make it more immersive. So this is the way we add sound effects and music. Of course, I also need to show you how to play different walking sounds on different surfaces, but that's something that we're going to do in a different episode. I don't want to make this episode very long. And as we go from episode to episode, I'm going to add more of these audio sources for different things. So I'm not always going to tell you that, but this is the general way that we're adding sound effects, okay? And that's all for this episode. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you're still not subscribed. It really motivates me to see more people subscribing. And for you, it's just one click. For me, it's really a good feeling. Please leave a like. It will also help my video to get more exposure so more people can find these videos. And see you next time.